Hey students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab terms and take some notes. Our aim today is Malthus and overpopulation, and your first word is carrying capacity. And carrying capacity means the maximum population that an environment can sustainably support. This is a confusing and controversial term, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but basically it means the total number of people that are able to comfortably live in a certain area. And overpopulation means that the carrying capacity has been surpassed. In other words, there are more people living in an area than can be supported sustainably. Overpopulation means there are too many people and not enough resources for them. And it also implies that the environment is being degraded by too many people living in it. But you need to be really careful with these terms. They're more complicated than they look. I find that my students have a tendency to think that countries are overpopulated if they're either too poor or if they have too many people. But neither of those is really true. Let's start with the claim that poverty means overpopulation. In the modern globalized world, we have enough resources to sustain everyone on Earth, and we could sustain everyone on Earth if we chose to, but we choose not to. And my point is that the allocation of resources is more dependent on politics and power than it is on population size. And as to the claim that overpopulation is when we have a lot of people living somewhere, well, there are places with small populations that lack adequate resources. You could imagine like a small village in the desert. And there are places with enormous populations that have plenty of resources, like in China. So I encourage you to be very careful with how you use these terms, especially if you're applying them to a country today. Someone who talked a lot about overpopulation was this guy. Let me see if I can get my picture out of the way. There we go. And this is Thomas Malthus. Malthus was an 18th century English demographer who that warned that population growth would exceed the food supply. And Malthus lived in England during the Industrial Revolution, and as you learned earlier, there was huge population growth going on in England at this time because of increases in agriculture and then later the advances in medicine. So Malthus saw the population growth and he got very worried. And he was worried because the population was growing geometrically or exponentially, but the food supply was growing linearly or arithmetically. And geometric growth looks like this line, this curved one, which curves up rapidly. And if you like math, this is an equation like y equals 2 to the x. But Malthus saw that the food supply was only growing linearly, arithmetically, and that looks like this line here, a straight line. And that's something like y equals x. And Malthus saw that when the lines crossed, the population would begin to exceed the food supply. And that meant there were too many people and not enough food. And he warned that the result of this would be famine and mass starvation. Now, whenever you talk about Malthus, you should only be thinking about these two factors, the number of people and the amount of food. Malthus did not say anything about the amount of water or the amount of land or any other resources. His prediction was really just a relationship between food and population growth. Look at this chart of population growth over time. You can see that there were some very slight increases before 1800, and then right around 1800, boom, the population started to explode, just like Malthus predicted. So in that sense, Malthus was correct. Since 1800, population has grown geometrically. But in many other ways, his warning did not come true, and later you'll learn some of the reasons why. Neo-Malthusians are people in the modern world who share Malthus's concerns about population growth and argue that action should be taken to slow population growth. And anyone today who believes that government should take actions to slow population growth are called neo-Malthusians. This book in the picture, The Population Bomb, was published in 1960 by the biologist Paul Ehrlich. Ehrlich was a neo-Malthusian, maybe the most famous one, and he warned that population growth was going to lead to famine and catastrophe. This was in the 1960s, so well after Malthus. The book was sensational and it scared a lot of people. So you just look at the cover, you see this cute baby juxtaposed with a bomb. While you are reading these words, the cover says, 4 people will have died of starvation, most of them children. This sounds terrifying. But here's the problem with this book and with neo-Malthusians in general. Ehrlich was white and his audience was white. But as you've already learned, the countries with the high population growth weren't the ones with white babies like the baby on the cover. The countries with rapid growth were all in Africa and Asia, with black and brown babies. So this book convinced a lot of rich white countries to spend money on programs designed to get women in poor black and brown countries to have fewer children. And that created a messy situation. You will explore that controversy more in your essay for this unit. All right, it's time to review the objectives. If you don't know the answer to any of them, just rewind the video and look again. And I will see you in class. Bye, students.